Jesus warned us of a deadly snare in the last days. Jesus gave us very clear warnings of the last days. By the end of this video, you'll understand the one end times trap Jesus warned about more than earthquakes, wars, or plagues, and why most believers won't see it coming. Here's what's chilling. He wasn't warning unbelievers. He was warning his own followers, the ones who thought they were ready. How is that possible? How can we avoid this? There are only three possibilities. Each of these possibilities leads to a very different future, and each one deserves careful examination. But here's what makes this investigation unsettling, and this will become critical when we reach number 3. But before we get there, let's start with the most controversial statement. Number 1, what the end times snare actually is. Luke 21:34. But take heed to yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and cares of this life, and that day come on you unexpectedly. For it will come as a snare on all those who dwell on the face of the whole earth. Before we can truly understand the weight of Jesus' warning, we need to understand exactly what he was describing when he used the word snare, because this word meant something very specific to his original audience. In the ancient world, a snare was one of the most common and effective hunting tools available. It was simple in design, but devastatingly clever in function. Unlike weapons that overpower prey through direct force, a snare was designed to catch its prey through deception. The trap itself was almost always hidden, buried under leaves, concealed in tall grass, positioned along paths that animals naturally travel. The goal was invisibility. The goal was for the prey to have no idea it was walking into danger. The prey didn't stumble into the snare through bad luck. The prey walked toward something that looked like a blessing. And that's precisely when the trap sprung. Most people assume the snare catches the wicked, the godless, the people who have rejected truth and embraced rebellion. But that's not what Jesus describes at all. Look again at Luke 21:34. Jesus identifies 3 specific things that weigh down the heart and make it vulnerable to the snare. The first is surfeiting. This is an Old English word that most modern readers don't immediately understand. It refers to overindulgence, but not just in food. It's excess in anything. Having more than enough and still wanting more. Filling yourself to the point of numbness. This isn't about enjoying God's blessings or being grateful for what He provides. This is about being so stuffed with comfort, so saturated with pleasure, so full of good things that you lose your spiritual edge. Your senses become dull. Your alertness fades. You're so satisfied with the life you have that you stop watching for the life that's coming. The second thing that weighs down the heart is drunkenness. This one seems obvious on the surface. It's about alcohol, right? But Jesus is pointing to something much deeper than just drinking too much wine. He's describing anything that numbs you, anything that clouds your judgment, anything that makes you feel relaxed and good, while simultaneously making you less aware of what's happening around you. In our modern context, this could be entertainment that absorbs all your attention for hours. The point isn't the specific activity. The point is impaired awareness. The point is feeling comfortable while your guard is completely down. But here's what makes this even more significant. And this is something that will become essential when we examine the signs to watch for. One of those signs involves a worldwide numbing effect on human hearts. The cares of this life. And here's the one that catches most people completely off guard. The cares of this life aren't sinful things. They're normal things. Bills that need to be paid, responsibilities that demand attention, family concerns that weigh on your mind. These aren't evil, they're just consuming. They take up so much mental and emotional space that there's nothing left for spiritual vigilance. You're not rebelling against God. You're not rejecting His truth. You're just preoccupied with life. And that preoccupation is exactly what the snare exploits. And Jesus Himself pointed to two historical examples that prove exactly how this works. But here's what makes these examples even more significant, and this will become essential when we reach the sign of false peace. They reveal exactly what the final days will look like. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Pressures that follow you home, health worries that keep you up at night. These aren't evil, they're just consuming. They take up so much mental and emotional space that there's nothing left for spiritual vigilance. You're not rebelling against God. You're not rejecting His truth. You're just preoccupied with life. And that preoccupation is exactly what the snare exploits. And this is the exact condition Jesus warns makes people vulnerable to the snare. Not wickedness, preoccupation, not rebellion, distraction. The trap catches people who are so busy with life that they've forgotten to watch for eternity. Now we come to what might be the most important insight in this entire video. And if you miss this, you'll miss everything Jesus is trying to warn us about. This is the mechanism that makes the snare so devastatingly effective, and it's counterintuitive in every way. Jesus Himself pointed to two historical examples that prove exactly how this works. But here's what makes these examples even more significant, and this will become essential when we reach the sign of false peace. They reveal exactly what the final days will look like. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came, and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Look carefully at what people were doing before the flood came: eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage. These aren't evil activities. These aren't examples of wickedness that deserved judgment. These are completely normal activities, life activities, everyday human activities that people have engaged in since the beginning of time. The people in Noah's day weren't when judgment finally came. They were just living, going about their daily routines, planning for the future, celebrating weddings, building families, making business deals. Even thus shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. Again, eating, drinking, buying, selling, planting, building, commercial activity, agricultural activity, development and progress and planning for tomorrow. Sodom wasn't frozen in terror waiting for judgment to fall. Sodom was bustling with normal life, business as usual, deals being made, crops being planted, buildings going up, right up until the moment fire fell from heaven and Lot lived among them. Warning was available, but normalcy drowned it out. Here's the insight that should mark you permanently, and this becomes the thread. Judgment didn't interrupt life in either case. Life continued completely normally until it didn't. There was no warning siren that made everyone stop and look up. There was no moment where the whole city paused and said, "Something's wrong." The normalcy persisted right up until the exact second it was shattered. One moment, normal. The next moment, judgment. This is the snare. Not chaos that makes you alert. Normalcy that makes you sleep. Not danger that keeps you watching. Comfort that lulls you into spiritual unconsciousness. The trap works precisely because nothing seems wrong. Everything seems fine. Life seems good. And that's when it springs. But here's what makes this even more alarming. And this is something we'll examine next. Even people who know these truths can still be caught. So far, we've examined what the snare is, who it targets, how it operates, and why it's so devastatingly effective at catching even religious people who think they're ready. But Jesus didn't just warn us about the danger. He told us exactly how to avoid it. And his instructions are remarkably specific. But here's what makes this even more critical. And this connects directly to Scene 8, where we'll break down the practical application. Jesus gives us 3 specific commands, not suggestions. Look at Luke 21:34 again. Take heed to yourselves. This is the starting point. Personal responsibility. Jesus doesn't say, hope that a prophet warns you in time. He doesn't say, trust that you'll figure it out when the moment arrives. He doesn't say, let your church leaders watch for you. He says, take heed to yourselves. You are responsible for your own vigilance. You are responsible for the condition of or sleeping. No one else can do this for you. Second, pray always. Not pray occasionally when you feel inspired. Not pray when things get difficult and you need help. Not pray when you remember to fit it into your busy schedule. Always. Continuous communication with God. Constant connection to the only source of wisdom that can actually navigate what's coming. Prayer isn't just asking for things you need. It's maintaining relationship. It's staying plugged into the one who sees the trap that you can't see. The person who prays always is the person who stays alert. The person who stops praying is the person whose heart inevitably becomes overcharged with other things. And this connects directly back to Scene 2. Prayer is the antidote to the cares of life that weigh down the heart. Third, don't let life weigh down your heart. This is the practical application of everything Jesus has warned about. Guard your heart against overload. Be intentional about what you consume, what you pursue, what you allow to occupy your mental and emotional space. This doesn't mean abandoning your responsibilities or fleeing to a mountain to wait for Jesus. It means refusing to let normal life become all-consuming. It means keeping margin in your life for spiritual awareness. It means valuing watchfulness more than comfort. Here's the key insight that ties all 3 instructions together. And this is crucial for understanding how to actually escape, which we'll examine in detail in Scene 8. The escape isn't hiding from the world. The escape is refusing to sleep through it. You don't avoid the snare by retreating to some remote location where the trap can't find you. You avoid the snare by staying awake while everyone else is drifting off. You avoid the snare by keeping your attention on what matters eternally, while everyone else is distracted by the bait. But Jesus gave us more than just general instructions. He also told us specifically what to watch for. And these signs become the markers that keep us alert when everyone else is falling asleep. And what he told us will completely change how you see the world around you. The Bible is a history book, but it is unlike any other history book available in any public library. The history of the Bible starts with the creation of the earth and ends with the end of the world. No other history book has ever been published that covers such a broad range of events on planet Earth, partially because no one was present at the start to witness and document it, and therefore no one can write the beginning of our world authoritatively. We are the only folks in the whole world who know how it will all end. That is unique. The Lord did not reveal the future to his followers to satisfy their curiosity. It was to prepare them for the future, so that they would not be surprised when it arrived, and that they would not misinterpret it. Be grateful that Jesus was so forthright in sharing what the future holds for us. People ask, are we in the end times? However, the Bible talks of the last days, and we have been in the last days for 2,000 years. The last days started at Pentecost, where the first prophecy of the last days was fulfilled. Every Christian generation should live to be ready for the Lord's return. The Bible is a book full of predictions. Its pages contain 735 predictions about the future. A prediction can be found in 1/4 of the Bible's chapters. From beginning to end, it is basically a prophetic text, though some books focus more on predictions than others. 596 of the 735 predictions have indeed occurred and have literally come true according to the scripture prediction. So, 81% of all Bible prophecies have already come true, and some of those prophecies were made centuries before the case. It doesn't take much confidence to believe that the remaining 19% will happen as well. That's a very high score. The Bible has proved 100% right for every prediction that could have been fulfilled by now. Of the rest, most of them are concerned with the actual return of Jesus and what follows after that. How many of these predictions remain to come true before Jesus returns? The answer is about 20, and we're watching to see those happen first before we look for the Lord's return. Jesus told us to watch and pray. What do we watch? We cannot stand still and watch the clouds to wait for him to appear. That is not what he meant. He meant, keep an eye on what's going on in the world and see what signs I gave you to help you prepare. Signals are the signs. Sign number 1, mass deception, the foundation of everything. Matthew 24, 4-5. And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. This is the very first sign Jesus mentions, before he says a single word about war, before he mentions famine or earthquakes or any natural disaster, before he describes persecution or tribulation or any of the dramatic events we typically associate with the end times. The first thing, the absolute first thing, out of his mouth is a warning about deception. Take heed that no man deceive you. This priority isn't accidental. Jesus could have started anywhere. He could have led with the most visually dramatic sign to capture attention. He could have opened with wars or cosmic disturbances or any number of spectacular phenomena. But he didn't. He started with deception. And that ordering tells us something absolutely critical about the nature of the last days. Deception is not just one sign among many. Deception is the foundation. It's the environment in which all the other signs operate. It's the atmosphere that makes the snare possible in the first place. It's the water the fish swim in without even realizing they're wet. But here's what makes this even more alarming. Deception doesn't just exist alongside the other signs. Deception shapes how people perceive the other signs. It makes the chaos seem worse than it is, pushing people toward false solutions. It makes the false solutions seem better than they are, making people embrace things they would normally reject. It makes the false peace seem more real than it is, convincing people to relax when they should be most alert. When deception is operating, and make no mistake, it is operating right now at levels unprecedented in human history. Nothing appears as it truly is. Everything gets filtered through lies, and that's exactly what makes the snare so effective. But here's what we need to understand about the nature of this deception, and this is something most people completely miss. Jesus doesn't describe deception as obvious lies that everyone can easily identify and reject. He describes it as convincing, compelling, reasonable sounding. He says many will be deceived. Not a few gullible people on the fringes, but many. And in Matthew 24:24, he goes even further. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that, if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Did you catch that? The deception will be so sophisticated, so convincing, so well-crafted, that even God's chosen people, even those who know the truth, who study Scripture, who are actively watching, could potentially be deceived if they're not extremely careful. This isn't amateur hour deception. This isn't obvious lies that anyone with basic discernment can see through. This is professional-grade, supernaturally enhanced deception designed to fool the wisest and most spiritually alert people on the planet. False Christs, false saviors, false messiahs promising to solve the world's problems, false narratives about what's really happening in the world, false interpretations of current events, false promises of peace and security, false solutions to real crises. Sign number 2. Wars and rumors of wars, the pressure that creates desperation. Matthew 24:6-7. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines, and pestilences, and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Now we come to the sign most people think of first when they imagine the end times: wars, conflict, violence on a global scale, nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom. This is the dramatic, visible, headline-grabbing content that fills our news feeds and dominates our cultural imagination about the last days. But here's what's absolutely critical to understand, and this is something most people completely miss. Notice what Jesus says immediately after mentioning wars. See that ye be not troubled. Don't panic. Don't be alarmed. Don't let fear drive your decisions. Why would Jesus say that? Because he knows something about human psychology that the enemy also knows. Jesus isn't saying wars won't happen. He's not minimizing the suffering or pretending conflict isn't real and devastating. He's saying, don't let the wars themselves become the trap. Don't let fear of war push you into the arms of a false peace. Don't let exhaustion from conflict make you accept any solution just to make it stop. Wars and rumors of wars don't mean the end has arrived. They mean the pressure is increasing. They're indicators that birth pains are intensifying. And notice that exact phrase Jesus uses, the beginning of sorrows. The Greek word there is odin, which specifically refers to birth pains, labor contractions, the pain that comes before new life emerges. Anyone who has witnessed childbirth knows what happens to birth pains as delivery approaches. They don't stay constant. They intensify. They get closer together. They build and build until the moment of delivery can no longer be delayed. Jesus is telling us that wars, famines, pestilences, and earthquakes function the same way. They're not the end. They're the labor pains signaling that the end is approaching. But here's the danger that Jesus is specifically warning about. And here's what's truly chilling, and this connects directly to what we'll examine in sign number 4 about false peace. The snare doesn't spring during the war. It springs after, not during the fear, when the relief arrives. Wars aren't the trap. Wars are what make you desperate enough to walk into the trap when it's finally offered. Consider the pattern. Crisis after crisis, fear after fear, war after war, until the entire world is exhausted and desperate. And then, finally, someone or something emerges that promises to end the chaos, to restore stability, to bring peace and safety. After years of turmoil, that promise will feel like water in the desert. It will feel like the answer to prayer. It will feel like exactly what the world needs. And that's precisely when the snare closes.